Brian McCarthy here from Bold&Break, and I am delighted to be doing a discussion video today. This video is part of my wider series, How to Save Money as a Designer. In this video, we're going to look at the advantages and disadvantages of both paid and open source software. This video will help you decide what is the best route for you. So without further ado, let's get started. We are going to start off with the disadvantages of paid software. These disadvantages, some of them have been more apparent lately. Number one is apathy on the side of the developer or the company making the software. What do I mean by apathy? I mean laziness. This comes more with subscription model based software. So there are advantages to subscription models internally, but sometimes subscription models encourage a laissez-faire attitude. This hurts the consumer because there are bugs and there are fixes that need to be done that never really get done because everyone's paying this subscription model, and sometimes the encouragement or the incentive isn't there. And we've seen it in video games a lot, and we are definitely seeing it in software. Paid software, especially subscription again, there tends to be this push for growth. When these companies scale, they need to look for more pervasive ways to make money. And one of the most pervasive ways to make money is data collection. When you're buying a new piece of software, you're buying it to use it as a design tool. You're not buying it with the intention that your usage is going to be spied on, what you're browsing on the internet is going to be used against you in marketing data, adverts, and maybe there is more sinister data collection going on. That is an issue within paid software, especially the more subscription-based software models. Paid subscriptions can become a bit of a financial burden on you, and you never end up upskilling because you feel indebted to using this piece of software constantly. This can be a problem because if you're just going to, roll on a subscription every year, you're going to feel like you're going to be wasting your money if you go learn something new. And it can have actually an opposite effect. And this is another point, is that you will pay a subscription and never use the software. And I have fallen into that trap myself. I've paid for something, I'm going to upskill in this, and you only use it for one or two paid projects, or you've wasted this big chunk of money on this subscription and you almost feel cheated or stupid, and you're like, oh, why did I pay for this whole year and I only used it twice? So I would say a lot of those disadvantages maybe lie more towards subscription-based software, but we're going to talk about the advantages. And the first advantage of paid software is there is a centralized team to make decisions. Paid software allows for investment and development team and creative team to all make decisions internally of what direction they want their design tool to go. And they can also consolidate feedback in a centralized format, which can be helpful to understand what the software is for and what direction the software is going. So one of the biggest advantages of paid software is it is commonly used across pipelines. It's a traditional way of doing things. The thought of having to pay for something means you're getting value for your money. Many agencies will have these subscription models for Adobe or for Maxon, and they'll just be rolling them year on year on year. People within these pipelines and studios and agencies will end up just using those tools, and the expectation is that other people that come in are doing that also. If you go into these work environments and you're only using open source software, that can be a bit tricky to integrate into a team, and you're like, oh, I use this software and no one's ever heard of it there, and they're like, what? You use that? What's that? And there can be sometimes a little bit of snobbery when you're not using the most common tools in the industry. I've experienced this myself. People are almost patronizing about things like Blender, and Blender is an amazing tool. And any designer worth their salt knows it's just a tool and it depends how you use it. But unfortunately, there is a stigma attached to unknown software. Another advantage of paid software is the dedicated support team. There is usually a team there to help you with any queries or issues that you may have, whether it's a bug or you're struggling to install it or the software is crashing. And that kind of, you have to see it as your subscription model or your once-off payment is paying those people to help the consumers of that software package. Having a dedicated support team can be really helpful at times. Saying that, you know, there are software packages out there with such big communities that you don't really need the dedicated support teams. But there are other open source software packages out there that have very small communities, and it would be really helpful if they had like a team of 5 that knew the software inside out and all the variables that came with it. Cool, so we ran through the advantages and disadvantages of paid software. Now we're going to go into open source software. The first advantage of open source software is it's free, and there's nothing really to expand on that. So an undervalued advantage of open source software is that the open source software itself is quite transparent. The code will be out there online for anyone to inspect. So that means it will be heavily scrutinized by the community. So any security flaws, any bugs, download the code yourself and tweak it. And there's a huge strength in that transparency, in building a trust between the user and the developers behind this application. And building on that trust, then start to build a very strong community, which we can see with Blender. People champion Blender and they defend Blender for anyone that criticizes it. And it's great to see. I've loved to see the Blender community grow strength to strength. And there are other open source projects out there just like Blender. So one of the most undervalued advantages of open source software is it allows anyone from any demographic to open up an application and create something. You don't need to pay a penny. That is essentially offering anyone in the world with a laptop free education. I'm a big believer in that, and I think Blender has shown its strength in allowing people from any background, any demographic, to make some amazing content, animations, models, whatever. It's all out there. And I cannot understate the importance of free education. Allowing people to download something and to just start exploring without having to pay is huge. Okay, so we're going to look at some of the disadvantages, maybe the challenges of open source software. So one of the first challenges to open source software is learning the damn thing. So if you're like me and you've been using paid software your whole life and that's the only tool you know, it can be quite difficult to learn a new software application, especially if you're freelancing, doing a YouTube channel, you know. It's tough. You've got to set aside time, you know, every week, every month, to learn a new software application. If you're new coming into 3D or you're new coming into design and motion graphics, I would say explore all these options because you probably have more time than you think you do. A lot of open source software isn't used in large scale pipelines. Sometimes it is, but it's rare. That will change over time. It's going to become a cost efficient thing, but it's going to take a while because humans are creatures of habit. A lot of people aren't open-minded to learning new software tools, especially in an environment where there is a profit to be made. There is a worry that if we switch to an application that we've never used before, we could potentially lose thousands, which is a valid thought to have. Support can be limited for open source software. Yes, I keep referring back to Blender because Blender is the most known open source design application. There are dozens, hundreds out there. Some of those open source tools may not have the big communities that may be able to help you if you have an issue straight away. So you end up having to figure it out by yourself, which is a little bit trickier. Some open source software projects will end up fizzling out. People will get bored and they'll leave you there with a project that hasn't been updated for 2 years, and you're like, well, can't use it on the new version of Windows, the new version of Mac. Thanks, guys. If you're going to use open source software, make sure you're using something that has, maybe consistent updates or a strong community. Don't go looking for that super cool hip alternative one that's just started yesterday and has one dev. That's not a good choice. So I hope you enjoyed this video and it gave you an idea of the open source landscape and the paid software landscape. In the next video, I am going to show you some of the paid alternatives I use that are much cheaper. We're going to take some of the costs, break it down, if you're to do the Adobe subscription, Maxon subscription, how much you could save versus some of my paid alternatives with maybe some open source packages thrown in there. That'll be a bit of fun. So stay tuned for that one. That one will come out soon. Please remember to like, subscribe, all those good things. Comment below what you think. Did you get anything from this? Are you going to use open source software? Stick it to the man. Let me know in the comments below. Thank you and goodbye.